Hey guys, Jason here at Cooperative Motorworks and Motorhome Rehab Ranch. So this is the second episode or video on the Onan series that we're doing. So today I'm going to talk about how to check if your generator is making power. So if you've got it running and it's just not maybe turning anything on inside the coach, what to look for on that, and how to make it make power if it's not making power. And this isn't a complete exhaustive list on this. This is just the most likely things. If it's something that, if you try all the things that I talk about and it still doesn't make power, your best bet's probably to just upgrade to a different generator, because it's probably beyond what it's worth actually investing the time and energy into trying to fix. So we're going to talk about flashing the fields on this. I'm going to talk about the bridge rectifier and how you can find that and how you can test it to see if that may be the issue. Also, I'm going to show you how to test if it's making power at the circuit breaker. Kind of turn this around a little bit. So at the back of the engine you got the circuit breaker on top, and so we'll show you testing that. And there's also a spot where the generators typically, at least on the GM floor plan ones, where the generator gets plugged into by the house wire. So that's a compartment typically, and we'll show you that compartment on a coach. And then that way, you may have your generator running, but if you don't have it plugged into in that compartment, then it's not making it into the house circuit breakers. All right, some of the tools that we're going to be using today is a multimeter. So I have just a pretty standard one here. I like to have one that also has a probe as well as the gator clips. I have the probe on the positive and I have the gator clip on the negative. And then I'm also going to be using a test light. So these are a couple of test lights. For this, you want the cheapest test light you can get that has an incandescent bulb. Don't go with the fancy, this is a snap-on one that's got a circuit board and it tells you exact voltage. Don't try and use one of those, because you might damage it. It's likely that you will burn out the bulb in this little incandescent one, but like I picked up this one from Harbor Freight for $3.99 and it should do exactly what I want to do with it. So even at $3.99, if you get power out of your generator, it's okay if you throw this thing away afterwards, but you can replace the bulb and it'll fix it. Other than that, we'll just I have a 1/4 inch nut driver, but you probably won't have to do that part because it's not likely you're gonna probably be wanting to go in and check your bridge rectifier. So, but if you need to, then that's the tool you're gonna need for that. Okay, so one thing I'm going to show you real quick, just in case if you're not familiar with these coaches, it's maybe new to you, how the generator actually ties into the house wiring. So because you may have the generator running and it may actually be making power, but maybe it's just not running anything inside, so you think it's not making power. So the way the GM floor plans were set up, typically, at least if it's the standard one, is you have this compartment here on the side of the coach. It's on the driver's side above the rear wheels, and inside it you have your power cable. So this one happens to be a 50 amp power cable, meaning that this coach probably had dual roof ACs. That's typically how you know which ones have which. If it has 3 prongs, and that's the 30 amp systems. A lot of the northern coaches had the 30 amp setup instead of the 50 amp because they were only running 1 roof AC. A lot of those coaches had the Onan 4000, and I think I had said earlier in the video, one of the videos, that most of the 26 coaches had the 6K, and that is usually only the 23s that had the 4K. But some of the 26-foot coaches that were in the north that only had one roof AC did have a 4,000 generator instead of the 6,000. So the way this thing's set up is this power cord ties directly into the house system. So if you plug this into a house receptacle, or you're at the RV park and you plug it in there, that's powering that circuit, circuit breakers inside. But the generator, if you don't have an automatic transfer switch, which I don't think any of the originals had that, maybe some of the trans modes that weren't made by a GM, but they were plugged in this box to this outlet. So this outlet that's in the box actually goes directly to the generator itself. And what that ended up doing is it kind of saves you some, fail points or whatnot. You don't want your generator hooked up all the time necessarily, and auto transfer switches can go bad. So this way, if you're not plugged into the house circuit, when you coil this cord up in here, it kind of lays out to where you can plug it into this receptacle. So this one might have, yeah, so it plugs in right there. And then when I run the generator, it's going to be powering it through this whole coil of cable into the coach. So if that's unplugged and it's not making power, plug that in first and see if that starts things up. You can also check to see if there's power at this outlet, because maybe it's just not transferring through. Maybe your switches or your plug is bad. Sometimes these plugs, when you twist them and bend them, the wires inside come unhooked. So you may need to replace the end on it or take it apart and replace that. All right, so I'm going to do a quick kind of close-up of how I'm setting up the multimeter to check the AC output of this generator. I'm going to do that with it not running, because it's going to be hard to hear me talk about how I set this up while the engine's running. But I'll also try to maybe get some footage of me doing it while it's running, but I'm not sure if I'll get that or not. So I have my multimeter here. You can have whatever type of multimeter you have. I'm going to set it to AC voltage. That's the little squiggly line, because it's not direct current, it's alternating current. So I have that to AC voltage, and you can see on the screen it says AC auto voltage. I'm going to take my ground wire and I'm going to hook it up, in this case, to the battery that it's running off of, to the ground. You can also go to the frame of this, because the frame is grounded out. But if you have the battery right there, then you might as well go to that. I'm going to take my positive probe, and you can see that it has kind of a pointed tip. I already took off the gator clip from it so that I can probe with it. And I am going to, once the engine's running, I'm going to probe into this wire right here. And on the other side of it, there's another one very similar. I'm going to probe into that. And those should each be giving me about 120 volts, 110, 125, somewhere in there. And that can all be varied by the engine, so it's going to adjust the output on that accordingly. And probably Jim will do a video on how you can adjust all of that, but we're not going to talk about that so much. We're just going to see if we can make this make power, and all the tuning of it, that will be for later. Alright, so I showed you guys how to use the multimeter to check if it's making voltage. I'm going to go a little more advanced in that. So if you didn't see power on this side, but you are seeing power on this side of it, then this push to reset, if you trip that, the circuit breaker might be tripped inside this housing. And you may even have to replace that circuit breaker. I don't know the part number on that. I haven't had to do one of those, but it is a possibility. If this side's not making power, then it's probably the generator itself, and that's where we're going to start covering the bridge rectifier, which is this, and flashing the fields. So we'll do flashing the fields first, and then we'll talk about this, because if flashing the fields doesn't do it, then this is probably the last thing that you're going to want to look at. Alright guys, so if you're flashing the fields on this, how you're going to do it is, probably the easiest way to do it is from inside the coach, wherever your main panel is for the circuit breakers. So you're going to want to make sure all of the circuit breakers are turned on. And where I'm going to hook up is, I'm going to take my test light. So this is my incandescent bulb, cheap Harbor Freight or wherever you want to get it from, test light. And I'm going to take my clip lead here, and inside this closet you can see there is a terminal in here, and you should be able to hook that up. And if you have it hooked up correct, when you touch this to ground, it should light up this light. That means that you have battery voltage there. You may want to check and see how much battery voltage you have there. It'd be good to have probably closer to 12 or a little above 12 volts to do this, but as long as you have voltage there that's enough to light up the light, you probably are going to be okay. So what you want to do is get the generator started, running, and everything's plugged in. It's doing everywhere between the generator and the panel inside is hooked up. So you've got it plugged in the box and everything's good. You want to, since I have an outlet right here, I'm going to unplug my power converter, and I'm going to take my little test probe, and I actually bought one that has a thinner point on it, so I don't know if this one would get in there enough, but while it's running, you're going to actually probe it into the outlet in one of the two vertical holes while it's running. If it works, it should it should take off, and it should start making power, and it will likely blow out the bulb in here. But that's a cheap couple cent bulb, so no worries. It shouldn't do any major damage or anything, but that will basically happen once it's energized the fields inside the stator. The magnetisms come back. It's going to generate enough power that it's going to be too much for this thing to handle, and then it's going to pop that. But that's okay. So you can just hold it in there until it either does that, or I mean, obviously if it starts smoking or doing anything like that, that's a good indicator not to do it. If it never does anything, then there's probably another problem, and it may be the bridge rectifier. So we'll go talk about that next. All right, so if the flashing the fields didn't wake up the generator, didn't start making power, then one of the last things you can check is the bridge rectifier. It's this little square piece, and I'm going to show you where it's at. So if you pull the generator drawer out, it's going to be in the back over here. It's going to be behind this cover. So you can take this cover out, and then there's this little screw here which you can take out. I already took this one out. It's just going to be a 1/4 inch nut driver to take it out, or you may have some kind of other screw in there. I don't know if it's been replaced, but once that's out, this comes out of there, and you've got a little pack like this. So you're probably going to want to use some kind of a screwdriver to get it apart. you may want to, if it doesn't have, I've been told that some of these have a red mark somewhere on the A terminal. I think I put like a little plus sign and then a minus sign, and then these are our AC terminals. I'm just going to put a little mark here and here so I know it can go back in the same place if this is not the issue, or so I can kind of you know, orient it with the new one. So that's just going to unplug, kind of wiggle it out, and you've got that setup. So here on mine, you can see it says AC. It's got a minus there. Okay, and then on the other side, it doesn't appear to have anything, but in the book, I'll show you a page that shows what the labels of those are. What we're going to do, I'm going to put this on a bench to test it, to show you how to do that. And we're just going to use an ohm meter. So the multimeter, we're going to use an ohm meter to test from pin to pin in different orientations. There's about 8 different tests that you have to do because there's 4 diodes inside. Alright, so I have my bridge rectifier out, and I have it sitting on my piece of paper here. I have this piece of paper that has how this all works and shows what the terminals are and what pins to test and how to test them. So I have my multimeter here set up on ohms. I'm testing resistance, and I have it set up to test diodes, so you can see the little diode symbol up in the corner. That's going to be similar to what's on the paper here. And so basically what we're looking for is that there is going to be continuity from one pin to another, the direction the diode's supposed to go, but not backwards. If it's going backwards, then the diode failed and it's letting it go back and forth. And if there's no continuity between one of the pins and where it's supposed to go to, then that's another problem, because it could have failed to where it's open and it just doesn't allow power through. So I'm going to start with, they want me to check with my black lead on A. So I have it on pin A here, and my red lead on pin B. And you can see I have a good reading here. And then they want me to check pin A to pin D. So that's this one. I've got a good reading there as well. And then they want me to check pin B to pin C. So I'm going to go B to C. That's good. And while I'm at it, they want me to check B to A. So B to A is open lead. So that's infinity. There's no continuity there. That's good. That tests all right. And then I'm going to test D to C. And that's good. And then I'm going to test D to A. And there's nothing there, so that's good. And then I'm going to test C to B. Nothing there, that's good. And C to D. And there's nothing there. So this tested out okay. So that one is fine. If you didn't get those kind of testings, then that may be an issue. Alright, so now I've showed you how to, check if your generator's making power and how to fix that if it's not. If it did, if you got it to make power and then you just have like circuit board issues, or you want to put in the prime circuit, that's what the next video is going to be on. So if you watch that one, should answer most of your questions on those. Alright, thanks.